My name is Michael, and if someone had told me 6 months ago that my life would turn into a nightmare, I would have just laughed. I had a wonderful wife, Ashley, beautiful, smart, and kind. We had been together for 8 years, 5 of them married. We owned a cozy house in the suburbs of Chicago, had a stable life, and, as I thought, a strong love. I was proud of our marriage. We always supported each other, dreamed of the future, planned trips. Sure, we had occasional arguments, but they seemed insignificant. Who doesn't? I worked as a sales manager for a large company, often traveling, but I always tried to make up for my absence with gifts, dinners at nice restaurants, and little surprises. Ashley worked at a marketing agency, and her career was also on the rise. We were both busy, but we truly valued the time we spent together. But as it turned out, that wasn't enough. The first red flags appeared about 6 months before I found out the truth. Ashley became more secretive. She spent more time on her phone, sometimes quickly closing chats when I entered the room. Her work meetings suddenly lasted longer, sometimes turning into girls' nights with coworkers I had never heard of before. I trusted her. I wasn't the kind of man who got jealous over little things. But deep inside, an uneasy feeling began to grow, something cold and heavy, something I tried to ignore. That night, when it all began, I came back from a business trip earlier than planned. I wanted to surprise Ashley, buy her favorite flowers, order dinner, and spend a cozy evening together. I parked in front of our house, stepped out of the car, and saw a black SUV slowly pulling away from our driveway. Back then, I had no idea that moment would change my life forever. I stood there for a few seconds, watching the SUV disappear down the street. Something about it felt wrong. It wasn't a delivery car. It wasn't a neighbor's vehicle. And as far as I knew, Ashley didn't have any friends who drove a black SUV. Brushing off the uneasy feeling, I took a deep breath and headed inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Normally, when I got home, Ashley would at least have the TV on or music playing in the background. "Ashley?" I called out. No answer. I set my bag down by the door and walked into the living room. The faint scent of cologne, one that wasn't mine, lingered in the air. My stomach twisted, but I pushed the thought away. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was just a new air freshener. A moment later, I heard the sound of water running upstairs. The shower. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heartbeat picking up. Our bedroom door was slightly open, and as I stepped inside, I noticed something on the floor, Ashley's dress. It was crumpled, lying near the bed. Her heels were tossed to the side, as if she had taken them off in a hurry. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I walked toward the bathroom door. It wasn't locked. "Ashley?" I called again, my voice tight. The water stopped, and a few seconds later, she stepped out, wrapped in a towel. When she saw me, her eyes widened in shock, just for a split second. Then she quickly recovered, forcing a smile. "Michael. You're home early," she said, her voice a little too cheerful. "Yeah. I wanted to surprise you," I said slowly, my eyes searching her face. She tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear, avoiding my gaze. "That's sweet. I just got home from work." I felt gross, so I jumped in the shower. Something wasn't right. I glanced at the hamper where she usually tossed her clothes. It was empty. That dress on the floor, she hadn't even bothered to put it away. That wasn't like her. I nodded, pretending to believe her. "Long day at work?" "Yeah," she said quickly. "Really exhausting." I didn't push it. Not yet. But deep inside, a crack had formed in the trust one thought we had. And that crack was only going to get bigger. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed next to Ashley, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The black SUV. The scent of cologne. The way she had looked at me, just for a second, before forcing that too bright smile. Something was off. But I didn't want to believe it. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was just tired from the trip. Ashley had never given me a reason to doubt her before. She wasn't the type of woman who would do something like that. And yet. The next morning, I watched her carefully. She acted normal, maybe a little too normal. She hummed while making coffee, kissed me on the cheek like she always did, and talked about her plans for the day. But I caught the way she kept glancing at her phone. The way she turned the screen away from me whenever a notification popped up. "Who keeps texting you this early?" I asked casually. She hesitated for just a fraction of a second before smiling. "Oh, just work stuff." I nodded, pretending to accept the answer. But the crack in my trust had grown wider. Later that day, while she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I would do. I picked up her phone. It was locked, of course, but I knew her passcode. My hands were shaking as I entered it. The home screen unlocked, and I hesitated. Was I really doing this? I took a deep breath and opened her messages. Most of them were normal, texts from coworkers, from her sister, from friends. But then I saw one thread with no name. Just a phone number. And my stomach dropped. I clicked on it. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." My heart pounded so hard I thought I might be sick. My fingers trembled as I scrolled up. I wish I could have stayed longer. "You looked so beautiful lying next to me." The room blurred as I stared at the words. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. Ashley. My wife. The woman I had loved and trusted for years. She had been in our bed with someone else. And now, I had proof. I stood there, gripping Ashley's phone, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. My hands felt ice cold, but my blood was boiling. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, some way this wasn't what it looked like. But the words on the screen didn't lie. My wife had been with another man. In our bed. Footsteps sounded from the bathroom. The door creaked open, and Ashley walked out, towel wrapped around her body, her damp hair clinging to her shoulders. She froze the second she saw me standing there with her phone in my hand. For the first time, she didn't try to hide the fear in her eyes. "Michael." She started, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned the screen toward her. "Who is he?" My voice was calmer than I expected. Too calm. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced at the phone, then at me, calculating. I could see the gears turning in her head, searching for a lie that might save her. "Michael, it's not what you think," she finally said. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Not what I think." "Ashley, I read the messages. I saw everything." She swallowed hard, but still, she hesitated. "Say his name." My voice was quieter now, but there was something in it that made her flinch. "Who is he?" Tears welled up in her eyes. For a second, I thought maybe she would finally tell the truth. But then, she shook her head. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "It didn't mean anything." A mistake. Didn't mean anything. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. "So you accidentally let another man into our house? Into our bed? You accidentally let him touch you? Michael, please." Her voice cracked, and she reached for my hand, but I pulled away like her touch burned me. "How long?" I demanded. She bit her lip, hesitating again. "How long, Ashley?" I shouted this time. She squeezed her eyes shut, as if saying it out loud would make it real. And then, barely above a whisper, she finally answered. 6 months. 6 months. I staggered back, as if she had punched me. My whole world tilted. The late nights at work. The secret texts. The sudden distance between us. It had been happening right in front of me this entire time. And I had been too blind to see it. My hands curled into fists, and for a second, I didn't know what I was going to do. Yell. Throw something. Walk away. Ashley took a step closer, tears streaming down her face. Michael, I still love you. I made a mistake. I don't want to lose you. I stared at her, barely recognizing the woman in front of me. She had already lost me. She just didn't know it yet. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at Ashley as her words echoed in my head. 6 months. Half a year of lies, sneaking around, and pretending to love me while she was with someone else. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain ripping through my chest. But I didn't. Instead, I exhaled slowly and spoke through clenched teeth. Who is he? Ashley wiped at her tears. It doesn't matter. Who is he? I cut her off, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. She hesitated. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she muttered, his name is Jake. Jake. The name meant nothing to me, but it sent a fresh wave of anger crashing through my body. I took a step closer, my pulse pounding. Do I know him? Ashley looked down, avoiding my eyes. And that was my answer. My stomach twisted. I racked my brain, trying to connect the dots. Who the hell was Jake? A coworker? A friend? Someone I had shaken hands with? I grabbed her phone and scrolled through the messages. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to focus. And then, I saw it. A photo. A selfie. Him. Tall. Dark hair. Smug smile. And my blood ran cold. I did know him. He wasn't just some stranger. He was worse. I looked up at Ashley, and my voice came out quiet, but deadly. My friend Jake. That Jake? Ashley squeezed her eyes shut, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Michael, I let out a bitter laugh. I couldn't help it. You cheated on me with him. A guy who has eaten dinner at our house. A guy I've trusted. She sobbed. I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't just hurt me, Ashley. You destroyed me. I couldn't look at her anymore. I needed to get out. To breathe. I grabbed my keys off the counter and stormed out, slamming the door behind me. Ashley called after me, but I didn't stop. I got in my car and gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My vision blurred with rage, heartbreak, and disbelief. I had been betrayed before, but never like this. And I had no idea what to do next. I didn't know where I was driving. My mind was racing, my thoughts a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and betrayal. The cold night air cut through me as I sped through empty streets, barely noticing the world around me. It felt like I was suffocating, like the walls were closing in, and I couldn't escape. I finally pulled into a parking lot by the lake, the dim lights reflecting off the water. I sat in the car for a long time, just staring out at the dark horizon. 6 months. That thought kept repeating in my mind like a broken record. I kept seeing her face, her eyes brimming with fake regret, her voice begging me to understand. But no matter how many times I replayed our conversation, nothing made sense. Ashley and I had built this life together. We'd shared dreams, we'd laughed, we'd cried. And all along, she'd been lying to me. I clenched my jaw, trying to suppress the urge to scream. I wanted to destroy everything. I wanted to find Jake and make him feel the same pain I was feeling. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the messages again. I needed to know more. I needed to see how deep the lies went. It was hard to keep my hand steady as I tapped through the conversations. The more I read, the more I felt like I was suffocating. There were plans to meet up, secret notes about what they'd done together, sweet words she had never once said to me. My throat tightened as I realized how little I truly knew her anymore. I scrolled past the messages and found photos of the two of them together. At a bar. At a restaurant. His arm wrapped around her waist, his hand in her hair. Her smile, so different from the one she gave me, so much brighter, more genuine. It hurt to look at it, but I couldn't stop. Finally, I stopped. There was a message from Jake. We need to be careful. Michael's starting to ask questions. That was it. The last piece of the puzzle. She had been hiding this from me, playing both sides, lying to my face while keeping him on the side. I slammed my hand on the steering wheel, the sound echoing through the empty night. I had been blind. I had been so sure of our relationship, so sure that nothing could come between us. But it was all a lie. I needed answers. I needed closure. So I did the only thing I could think of, I called him. It rang for a while before he picked up. Jake, I said, my voice low and controlled. Who is this? He sounded confused, but there was an edge of recognition. It's Michael. I know what you did. There was a pause. And then, he laughed. Not a nervous laugh, but a smug one. Look, man, I don't know what you think you know, but... Shut up. I shouted, and I could feel my blood boiling again. You think this is some joke? You think this is funny? There was a pause on the other end, and then his tone shifted. Look, it wasn't supposed to go this far. I didn't mean for it to end like this. That was it. That was the truth. They had both known. And neither of them cared. I could feel the tears rising in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to cry over someone who didn't care. Stay away from my wife, I spat through clenched teeth, and with that, I hung up. I sat there in the car, staring at the screen of my phone, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I had no idea what would come next. But I knew one thing for sure, things would never be the same. I don't know how long I stayed by the lake that night, but when I finally drove home, the house felt cold and unfamiliar. The door creaked open, and as I stepped inside, the silence hit me harder than I expected. Ashley was sitting on the couch, her head in her hands, eyes red from crying. She looked up at me as I walked in, but there was no surprise on her face. It was like she had been waiting for this moment. Michael, she whispered, her voice thick with guilt. I didn't think you would come back. I closed the door behind me, my heart pounding in my chest. My hands were still shaking from the call with Jake, but now it was something else, a quiet rage, a brokenness I wasn't sure how to fix. I stood there, staring at her. There was no anger in her eyes, just regret. But it wasn't the kind of regret I could forgive. She wasn't sorry for me. She was sorry for herself. You didn't think I'd come back. I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. What did you think, Ashley? That I'd just let you get away with it? Pretend nothing happened? She shook her head, wiping at her eyes. No, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't think you'd still want to talk to me. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was bitter. After everything you've done, you're surprised that I'm still standing here. That I haven't walked out of this house. Her face twisted with pain. Please, Michael. I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But it's over now. I ended it with Jake. I want to fix this. Please, please don't leave me. I took a slow step toward her, my gaze cold. You don't get it, do you? It's not just about Jake. It's about everything. The lies. The secrets. The way you betrayed me. How long were you planning this, Ashley? How long were you planning on keeping me in the dark? She stood up suddenly, her voice breaking. I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt you, Michael. I swear I didn't. I felt like something was missing. Like we weren't connecting anymore. And I let it get out of control. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could fix it on my own. But I was stupid. I was wrong. I clenched my fists at my sides, trying to control the rising tide of anger in me. So, you thought the best way to fix things was to sleep with my friend? That's your idea of handling it? That's your solution? Her face crumpled, and she took a step back, almost as if my words physically hurt her. No, Michael, it wasn't like that. It wasn't about you. It was about me, I don't know, feeling alive again. But I see now how much I've hurt you. And I'm so sorry. I shook my head slowly, trying to keep the tears from welling up. Sorry doesn't fix this, Ashley. Sorry doesn't erase the last 6 months. Sorry doesn't make me forget the nights I spent thinking you were out there being faithful while you were lying to my face. Sorry doesn't bring back the trust that's gone. She reached out, as if to touch me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said quietly. Just, don't. She looked at me with those tear-filled eyes, and for a second, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with. But then the cold reality hit me. The woman I knew, the woman I trusted, was gone. We can't fix this, I whispered, the words tasting like acid in my mouth. I don't know if we ever can. Her eyes searched mine desperately. Please, Michael. I'll do anything. I love you. Please don't walk away from me. But I was already walking away. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. She called after me, but I didn't turn around. I knew in that moment that there was no coming back. Not from this. Not from her betrayal. I stepped outside into the cold night, and for the first time, I felt truly alone. The days after that night felt like a blur. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. There were moments when I thought about packing my things and leaving for good, disappearing from the place that once felt like home. But where would I go? What would I do? I had no clear answers. I found myself drifting through life like a ghost. I went to work, kept up the appearance of being fine, but inside, I felt empty. I couldn't shake the image of Ashley's tear-streaked face, her desperate pleas. But no matter how hard she tried, there was nothing she could say to undo what had already been done. She called me. At first, I ignored her calls, letting the voicemail fill up with apologies, with promises to make things right. Then one day, I picked up. Michael, her voice was softer now, more subdued, almost like she had finally accepted the weight of what she had done. I've been thinking a lot about everything. I know I ruined everything. I know I lost you. I need you to know that I love you, and I'm sorry. I wish I could take it all back. I would do anything to fix this. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. Because the truth was, no matter how much she regretted it, no matter how many times she said she was sorry, I didn't know how to forgive her. And even if I could, it wouldn't change the fact that something inside me had broken. The love I had for her, what I thought we had, felt like it was slipping through my fingers like sand. And I couldn't grasp it anymore, no matter how hard I tried. I spent the next few weeks reflecting on everything. On how I had ignored the signs, on how I had believed the lies. And even though it hurt like hell, I knew it was time to move on. I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. So, I did the hardest thing I'd ever done. I packed my things. I moved out. I didn't leave a note. I didn't leave a message. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. The truth was, I had already said everything I needed to say. It took months before I finally started to heal, before I started to feel like myself again. I surrounded myself with friends who reminded me that I was more than the broken man I had become. I found comfort in things that didn't remind me of Ashley. I found my peace in the quiet moments, in the feeling of being truly alone, but not lonely. The scars would remain. I would always carry the weight of her betrayal with me. But slowly, I learned how to live with it. How to use it as fuel to rebuild my life, to remind myself that I was worth more than the lies she had told. I would never forget the way she had looked at me that night, her face twisted with guilt and fear, and how I had realized in that moment that I was no longer the man she had once loved. I wasn't the same anymore. But, in the end, that wasn't her fault. It was mine. I had allowed myself to be blind. I had allowed myself to love her more than I loved myself. And now, I knew better. I knew that sometimes, moving on meant walking away, even when it hurt more than anything else. And that was the hardest lesson I'd ever learned.